Hey everybody, it's Jim here. When it comes to vintage guitars, I've always loved vintage specifications, as evident by this, my very first Fender guitar, a 1982 JV Stratocaster from Japan. I love the 7¼ inch radius and the smaller fret wire. It really feels right at home to me, and every other Fender guitar I own to this day has the 7¼ inch radius on it and close to small vintage style fret wire with one or two slight exceptions. However, I was recently asked to provide a part for somebody that required a Stratocaster, and since I have something else here that I purchased to sell that has very different specs, I thought it would be fun to get out of my comfort zone, not use the JV, and use a different guitar instead. This is the guitar that I ended up using on that session, a 2006 Fender Mexico Classic Player 60 Stratocaster. And while it may look pretty traditional at first glance, it's quite different from that JV that I was just holding in my hands. For starters, this has a 12-inch radius, which is the same as you would find on something like a Gibson Les Paul, so much flatter. It also has much larger frets on this compared to the small vintage frets on the JV. Lastly, it has a 2-point tremolo system as opposed to the old vintage style 6-screw that you would find on either reissues or the real thing of old Fenders past. Since I have been using this guitar quite a bit recently, I wanted to make today's video to go over some of the differences between them that you really feel. A sound comparison is only going to tell you so much, and one of the most important things in whether or not you as a player are going to gel with an instrument really comes down to how does it feel in your hands, because if it sounds great but you don't enjoy playing it, odds are it's not going to be a very inspiring experience. I'm going to start off with the modern spec and give you some of the pros of this one. To begin with, if you're somebody who really likes a low action, it is easier to achieve it with the flatter fingerboard and the bigger frets. You're not going to have to worry as much about fretting out in the upper registers if you want to go for some big bends or anything like that, because it's a flatter radius. You have to remember, on a 7¼ inch radius, it's much more circular, round on the top of it. So naturally, just due to the geometry of it, you're going to have the action a little bit higher on one of those style of guitars versus a more modern style that has a flatter radius. And that's just part of the way that the design works. The other thing I really like about this guitar, having played it for quite a bit, is the 2-point tremolo system. This is something that I wasn't so sure I was going to notice that big of a difference in, because the other guitar has a nice Callahan vintage style bridge assembly on it, but this is much more abusable by comparison. It's somewhat like a mini Jazzmaster vibrato in that sense, where I don't have to worry so much and I can really go to town on this. And if you're somebody who plays a lot of leads and you want to get things crazy, you want to do some flutters, have it behind everything, you can get away with so much more on this one and have the tuning remain reliably stable easier than you can on the traditional 6-screw bridge. And while those modern appointments certainly are cool and it's nice to see innovation happen over the years, it would be boring if things remained stagnant. However, for me, I believe I have remained stagnant, because going from one guitar to the other, I immediately was like, oh, I'm right back at home when I picked up the JV. And this is going to be one of the biggest pros I have for the vintage style. I acknowledge myself as primarily a rhythm guitarist. However, in reality, reality, if you play guitar, you're probably playing rhythm 90 to 95% of the time, even if you are the lead guitarist in your band, unless you're just playing some virtuoso stuff. But let's be honest with ourselves, that's the minority of guitar players. Rhythm is what we are doing the majority of the time. And because of that, the fact that this has the smaller fret wire as well as the vintage radius, for me, it is the perfect mix. Because if you're playing thumb over, it is so easy to do that on a vintage style radius with the smaller frets. You don't need to push down as hard to be able to kind of use phrasing a little bit differently or just in general form the chords because of the lower fret wire. It's just a much more comfortable, to me, experience when it comes to what I'm playing 90% of the time. When it comes back to the bridge, I mentioned this earlier that I feel that the modern 2-point, that was the biggest thing. I was like, okay, that's a serious improvement. There are ways that you can make this more stable if you do have a 6-screw bridge. And what I do is I tighten down only really the 2 outer screws. I have them touch down onto the body so that the base of the plate itself sits flush, and then I back off just a little bit. The inner 4 screws, I lay off even more than that, and thus I'm basically creating a similar style to the 2-point tremolo system found on modern instruments. But at the end of the day, while this definitely is usable, I would not put it in the same category stability wise as the 2-point trem system. So the modern design definitely has that going for it, at least in my book. Now, I realize I'm in the minority of players these days that still prefers the vintage specs on Fender guitars. It's just what I'm used to, what I grew up playing, and they feel at home to me. But being able to have the opportunity to really put a much more modern spec Fender through its paces in a professional environment, it did give me a new perspective on things, and I really can appreciate and understand why some people swear by those and they prefer those as opposed to me, and to each their own. That is the beauty of guitar. That is the beauty of instruments in general. There is no truly one size fits all. And the main thing I want to leave you with today before we get going is just some food for thought. I often read in the comments section of YouTube videos as well as on some of our favorite forums people that get really tribal about something as fickle as the specs on a guitar. They'll speak down upon it. Oh, this old vintage stuff, it's all antiquated. It's all no good. We should never make any of that again. It's got to have the sculpted heel joint here. It's got to have at least a compound radius of 12 through 16 and big old frets and a 2-point trem or a Floyd or whatever it is, or it's useless. Don't be like that, and don't ever listen to somebody like that. What I would really recommend that you do is try things in person. That's the best way for you to really find out what's going to work for you and what you really like. Because as I said earlier in the video, it doesn't matter what the specs of a guitar are. If when you sit and you play it, it feels like crap and it sounds great, you're not going to want to continue playing it. I've had a few of those in my day. Take the time and just find out for yourself. Life experience is always the best way forward. But that's where we're going to end today's video. I know it was a little bit kind of random, but it was something that I was thinking about, having just played that guitar quite a bit. And yeah, it's fun stuff. I love Stratocasters. I will be doing a long-term review of this guitar that I have owned for over 25 years. You guys voted in the poll. It ended up being a tie between this and the American Vintage 65 Jazzmaster, but this one has seniority as it's been with me the longest. So we'll start here next week. Thank you for watching. If you found this useful, helpful, entertaining, or just enjoyable, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and let me know whether you prefer vintage or modern spec Fenders in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take it easy, everybody.